I drove 6 hours for my brother's party the day after my parents completely forgot my birthday. I expected their usual indifference, but when my dad saw my $100,000 car, he didn't congratulate me. He turned pale, called an emergency meeting, and demanded access to my bank accounts. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss the financial secrets I uncovered. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious, where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The silence in the car was deafening, but it was still preferable to the noise waiting for me at the end of the drive. I had been on the road for 6 hours, navigating the winding interstate that connected the bustling, steel-and glass city where I built my life to the quiet, judgmental suburbs where I began it. My hands were tight on the leather steering wheel, my knuckles white, contrasting sharply with the pristine obsidian dashboard of my new vehicle. It was a purchase I had debated for months, a tangible symbol of a milestone I never thought I'd reach. But right now, it felt less like a trophy and more like armor. My body ached. It wasn't just the driving. It was a bone-deep exhaustion born from a week of sleepless nights closing the biggest merger of my career, followed immediately by a crushing viral infection that had left me shivering and feverish for 3 days. I was physically depleted, running on caffeine and a stubborn sense of obligation. Yesterday was my 29th birthday. I had spent it alone in my penthouse, nursing a cup of tea and watching the rain streak against the floor-to-ceiling windows. I had checked my phone obsessively, a childish hope fluttering in my chest every time the screen lit up. I got emails from vendors, texts from employees, and even a generic, happy birthday notification from my dentist. But from the people who mattered, from the people who had given me life, there was nothing. No call, no text, no card in the mail. Now, I was driving to their house because today, the day after my ignored birthday, was the day they had demanded I come home. Not to celebrate me, of course. They had summoned me for a mandatory family gathering to celebrate my younger brother, Weston. "It's crucial you're here, Olivia," my mother, K.H. Lowe, had said in her voicemail 3 days ago. Her voice had that clipped, airy tone she used when she was trying to sound authoritative but just sounded frantic. "Weston has big news. We need the whole family together. Don't be selfish." Don't be selfish. The phrase echoed in my mind, bouncing around the luxurious cabin of the car. It was the soundtrack of my childhood. Don't be selfish, Olivia. Weston needs the new cleats more than you need a tutor. Don't be selfish, Olivia. Let Weston have the bigger room. He needs the space to grow. Don't be selfish, Olivia. You can pay for your own textbooks. We're saving for Weston's first car. I pulled off the highway, the familiar landmarks of my hometown filling me with a nauseating mix of nostalgia and dread. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. Despite the fever that still lingered behind my eyes, making them glassy and tired, I looked put together. Sharp blazer, tailored trousers, hair sleeked back. I looked like the CEO I was. But as I turned onto the street I grew up on, I didn't feel like a CEO. I felt like that little girl in hand-me-down clothes, waiting by the phone for a call that never came. The betrayal of yesterday stung worse than the fever. It wasn't that they forgot. Forgetting implies an accident. They didn't forget. They just didn't care enough to remember. They had cleared their schedule for Weston's news today, prepared food, cleaned the house, and probably bought decorations. But 24 hours prior, on the day I was born, I hadn't warranted even a 30-second text message. I turned the corner and saw the house. It was a large, sprawling colonial that my parents, Anthony and K.H. Lowe, had always taken immense pride in. It looked the same as always, manicured lawn, fresh paint, an air of upper-middle-class stability. But as I slowed down, I noticed something odd. The blinds were drawn tight in the middle of the afternoon. The grass was a little too long, just slightly unkempt around the edges, as if the landscaper hadn't been by in a few weeks. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of new leather and conditioned air. I was walking into the lion's den, unarmed and unloved, carrying the weight of their indifference like a stone in my gut. I killed the engine. The silence returned, heavy and suffocating. I stepped out of the car, the cool autumn air hitting my fever-flushed skin. I looked at the house that had never really been a home, and a single, crystal-clear thought pierced through my exhaustion. The betrayal was worse than the fever, worse than the exhaustion, worse than the loneliness, because I knew, deep down, that while I was willing to die for them, they wouldn't even cross the street for me. I stood in the driveway for a moment, steadying myself against the door of my car. It was a Lucid Air Sapphire, a sleek, midnight blue beast of a machine that cost more than most people's college educations. I had bought it in cash 2 weeks ago, a reward for the sale of my first proprietary software patent. It was the only hint of my success I had brought with me. Usually, I rented a nondescript sedan when I came home, trying to avoid questions. But this time, in my sickness and haste, I had just driven what I owned. I locked the car, the mirrors folding in with a soft, expensive whir. I walked up the path, my heels clicking on the pavement. I didn't even have a key anymore. They had changed the locks 2 years ago when Weston thought he heard a noise and didn't bother to give me a new one. I rang the doorbell. It took a long time for anyone to answer. Finally, the door swung open, revealing my mother, K.H. Lowe. She looked strained. K.H. Lowe was a woman who prided herself on being the perfect hostess. She was usually impeccably dressed, her makeup flawless, her smile practiced. Today, her blouse was slightly wrinkled, and there was a tightness around her eyes that I hadn't seen before. "Olivia," she said, not stepping back to let me in immediately. She looked me up and down, her eyes critical. "You look pale. Are you wearing blush? You look like you haven't slept in a week." "Hello, Mom," I said, my voice raspier than I intended. "I've been sick and working." "Well, try to perk up," she sighed, finally stepping aside. "This is Weston's big day. We don't need you bringing the mood down with your gloominess." I stepped into the foyer. The house smelled of roasted chicken and heavy perfume. "It's good to see you too," I muttered, the sarcasm lost on her. "Did you get my message yesterday?" She frowned, closing the door behind me. "Yesterday? I don't check my phone when I'm busy, Olivia. We've been preparing for today all week. Weston is bringing his girlfriend, Jessica. It's very serious." "Yesterday was my birthday," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. I hated how needy I sounded. K.H. Lowe stopped walking. She turned to me, her expression blank, devoid of any real guilt. "Oh, was that yesterday? Well, happy birthday. We're doing a cake for Weston later. We can stick a candle on it for you if it means that much." If it means that much. As if wanting your mother to acknowledge your existence was a petty indulgence. "Forget it," I said, fighting the sting of tears in my eyes. "Where is everyone?" "Living room," she said, already walking away. "And please, Olivia, don't mention your job. Weston is. Well, he's in between opportunities right now, and we don't want to make him feel bad by talking about your little computer business." My little computer business had just been valued at 8 figures. But to K.H. Lowe and Anthony, unless you were a doctor or a lawyer, you were unemployed. And even if I were a doctor, they'd probably say I was showing off. I walked into the living room. My father, Anthony, was sitting in his favorite recliner, holding a glass of scotch. He looked older than I remembered, his face ruddier, his waistline softer. Weston was sprawled on the couch, looking every bit the 25-year-old adolescent he was. He wore designer sneakers that I knew he hadn't paid for and a watch that probably cost more than my first car. "Hey, Liv," Weston said, not looking up from his phone. "You made it." "Hi, Weston, happy, whatever this is," I said. "Dad, look who's here," Weston nudged Anthony. Anthony looked up, his eyes hazy. "Olivia, you're late." "I drove 6 hours, Dad, and I'm sick." "Excuses, always excuses," Anthony grumbled. "Sit down, Weston has news." I sat on the stiff armchair in the corner, the designated spot for the outsider. I watched them interact. The dynamic was painfully familiar. K.H. Lowe rushed in with appetizers, placing them directly in front of Weston. Anthony asked Weston about his video game rankings with genuine interest. I was a ghost in the room, a spectator to their happy family unit. "So?" Weston began, sitting up and clapping his hands together. "Jessica is coming over in an hour, but I wanted to tell you guys first. We're moving in together, and we're looking at condos downtown." That's wonderful, K.H. Lowe shrieked, clapping her hands. Oh, my baby is growing up. We found a place, Weston continued, a smirk playing on his lips. It's perfect. 2 bedrooms, view of the river. It's a little pricey, though. The down payment is significant. He looked at Anthony. Anthony shifted in his chair, clearing his throat. Well, son, we want to help. We always support you. I was thinking, Weston said, glancing at me briefly before looking back at Dad. Since Olivia is here, maybe she could chip in, as a birthday present to me. I almost choked on air. A birthday present for you. My birthday is next month, Weston shrugged. Close enough. I just drove here on my own dime, I said, my voice hardening. I have my own bills, Weston. Oh, come on, Olivia, K.H. Lowe snapped from the kitchen doorway. Don't be stingy. You have no kids, no husband. What else are you spending money on? Investments, savings, my future, I said. Selfish, Anthony muttered into his glass. Always thinking about your bank account. I stood up, the room spinning slightly. I needed air. I left my phone in the car, I lied. I'll be right back. I walked out the front door, my heart pounding against my ribs. The audacity was breathtaking. They ignored my birthday and then asked me to fund Weston's condo in the same breath. I walked down the driveway to my car, needing to just touch the cold metal to remind myself of reality. As I approached the Lucid, I saw the front door open again. Anthony had followed me out. Where do you think you're going? He demanded, stumbling slightly. We're not done discussing the... He stopped. He had walked past the large hedges that obscured the driveway from the front window. For the first time, he had a clear, unobstructed view of my car. The sunlight hit the midnight blue paint, making it shimmer. The massive rims, the futuristic curve of the chassis, the sheer presence of the vehicle screamed wealth. It wasn't a rental. It wasn't a mid-tier sedan. It was a spaceship. Anthony froze. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked at the car, then at me, then back at the car. His eyes widened, the haze clearing instantly, replaced by a sharp, calculating glint. Is that? He pointed a shaking finger. Is that yours? Yes, I said quietly. That's a Lucid, he whispered. He knew cars. He knew exactly what it was. That's $100,000 car, Olivia. Give or take, I said, crossing my arms. He looked at me, and I saw the shift happen in real time. The disdain, the dismissal, the irritation, it all evaporated. In its place was something far more dangerous. A look of sudden, desperate realization. He didn't know that the registration in the glove box listed the owner as OMH Holdings LLC. And he certainly didn't know that OMH stood for Olivia Marie Holdings, a shell company I used to protect my assets from people exactly like him. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I wasn't the same little girl who handed over her babysitting money to keep the lights on anymore. To understand the look on Anthony's face, you have to understand the history of my wallet. Since I was 16, I had been the family's unofficial safety net. When Anthony got laid off from the plant in 2012, I used the money I'd saved for a prom dress to pay the electric bill so the lights wouldn't get cut off while Weston was hosting a sleepover. When K.H. Lowe accidentally overspent on Christmas gifts for Weston, I covered the grocery bill for January and February. I worked 3 jobs in college, barista, library clerk, and freelance coder while maintaining a 4 GPA. I sent money home every month because they told me they were struggling. We're a team, Olivia, Anthony would say, his hand heavy on my shoulder. We all pull our weight. But Weston never pulled his weight. Weston was the creative one, the sensitive soul who couldn't be burdened with a job because it would stifle his spirit. He dropped out of 3 different colleges, all paid for by Anthony's retirement fund, and unbeknownst to me at the time, second mortgages on the house. I stopped sending money 3 years ago when I started my company. I told them I was broke, investing everything into a startup that might fail. They had scoffed. Wasting your time on computers, K.H. Lowe had sneered. You should have married that pharmacist. Since then, I had been poor Olivia in their eyes, the disappointment, the failure. Standing in the driveway, Anthony walked slowly around the car. He ran a hand along the hood, his touch reverent, almost lustful. "You bought this?" he asked, his voice low. "New." "Yes," I said, "I did well this year." "Well," he laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "You don't buy a car like this by doing well, Olivia. You buy a car like this because you're rich." He turned to face me. The calculation in his eyes was terrifying. He didn't look proud. He looked like a starving man who had just stumbled upon a banquet. "Come inside," he said. "It wasn't a request. We need to talk, now." He turned and marched back into the house, yelling for K.H. Lowe before he even crossed the threshold. "K.H. Lowe, K.H. Lowe, get in the living room, get Weston." I followed him, a pit of dread forming in my stomach. I should have just gotten in the car and left. I should have driven away and never looked back. But old habits die hard, and the curiosity, the need to see just how low they would stoop, kept my feet moving. When I re-entered the living room, the atmosphere had shifted from casual exclusion to high-stakes tension. Anthony was pacing back and forth. K.H. Lowe looked confused, wiping her hands on a dish rag. Weston was annoyed that his game talk had been interrupted. "What is it, Tony?" K.H. Lowe asked. "Is something wrong with the neighbors?" "It's not the neighbors," Anthony said, stopping in the center of the room and pointing a finger at me. "It's her." "Olivia," K.H. Lowe looked at me with renewed annoyance. What did she do now? "Tell them," Anthony commanded me. "Tell them what you're driving." I stayed silent, leaning against the doorframe. "She's driving a Lucid," Anthony announced, his voice shaking. "A brand new, top-of-the-line electric supercar. It costs more than Weston's tuition." The room went silent. Weston dropped his phone. K.H. Lowe's mouth fell open in a perfect, "Oh." "What?" Weston asked, laughing nervously. "No way, Olivia drives a rental. She's broke." "She's not broke," Anthony said, his eyes narrowing at me. "She's been lying to us. She's been hoarding money while we've been struggling." "I haven't been hoarding anything," I said calmly. "I earned it. I built a company. I told you I was building a company, but you never asked how it was going." "You said it was a little computer thing." K.H. Lowe shrieked. She looked at me with a mixture of awe and fury. "You let us think you were struggling. You let us pay for dinner last Thanksgiving." "I paid for Thanksgiving dinner, Mom," I corrected her. "You just put it on your card to get the points, and I Venmo'd you the cash." "Details." Anthony waved his hand dismissively. He took a step closer to me. He was a big man, used to using his physical presence to intimidate. He smoothed his polo shirt over his stomach, trying to look authoritative. "This changes things," Anthony said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "This changes everything. We need to have a family meeting. Right now. An emergency meeting regarding the family estate." "What estate?" I asked. "You guys have mortgages." "The family legacy," Anthony said grandly. "Sit down, Olivia. We need to review your finances. If you're living like a queen and your brother is struggling to find a home, there is a serious imbalance in this family that needs to be corrected immediately." He looked at me not as a daughter, but as a resource. An untapped oil well he had just discovered in his backyard. "Weston," Anthony barked, "get a pen and paper. We need to write down some figures." Weston scrambled up, a greedy grin spreading across his face. "Does this mean I can get the 3-bedroom condo?" he asked. "Maybe, son," Anthony said, staring me down. "Maybe even the penthouse. It depends on how cooperative your sister is willing to be." I looked at the three of them. My mother, eyes wide with avarice. My brother, entitled and eager. My father, the architect of my insecurity, now looking at me with predatory hunger. They had no idea what I was capable of. They thought I was still the girl who paid the electric bill to keep the peace. They didn't know I spent my days negotiating with hostile board members and dissecting corporate fraud. They wanted a meeting. Fine. I'd give them a meeting. "Sit down, Olivia," my father repeated, pointing to the stiff armchair I had vacated moments earlier. His tone was no longer dismissive, it was commanding, the voice he used when he was trying to sell a used car to a hesitant buyer. I didn't sit. I remained standing near the doorway, my arms crossed over my chest. "I'll stand," I said, my voice cool. "Suit yourself," Anthony scoffed, pulling a legal pad from the drawer of the coffee table. He clicked a pen with aggressive purpose. Now, let's get down to brass tacks. We need to understand the full picture here. How much did that car cost? Does it matter? I asked. Of course it matters. K.H. Lowe shrieked from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish rag as she hurried in. If you can afford a car like that, you can certainly afford to help your brother get settled. We've been worried sick about the down payment. Worried sick? I raised an eyebrow. You just told me 5 minutes ago you were handling it. We were stretching ourselves thin. Anthony slammed his hand on the table. For family, that's what families do, Olivia. They sacrifice. Clearly, you haven't been doing much sacrificing lately. I sacrificed for 10 years, I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. I paid your mortgage when you got laid off. I paid for Weston's first 2 attempts at college. I bought your groceries. Ancient history. Anthony waved a hand dismissively. That was pocket change compared to this. He gestured wildly towards the drive. You're clearly hiding millions. Millions, Olivia, while your brother lives in a shoebox apartment. Weston lives in a luxury loft downtown, I corrected him, which you pay for. He needs space to create. K.H. Lowe interjected, rushing to Weston's defense. He's an artist. He's 25 and unemployed, I countered. He's finding himself. Anthony roared, and you're hoarding wealth like a dragon. It's disgusting. It's selfish. He began scribbling furiously on the pad. Okay, here's the plan. We need access to your accounts, all of them. Checking, savings, investments. We need to see what we're dealing with so we can restructure the family assets fairly. Restructure? I almost laughed. There are no family assets. There are my assets and there are your debts. Don't be insolent, Anthony snapped without looking up. You're part of this family. Your success is our success. We invested in you. We raised you. We fed you. You fed me, I repeated slowly. You did the bare minimum required by law to keep a child alive. And even then, I bought my own clothes since I was 14. Ungrateful, K.H. Lowe muttered, shaking her head. After everything we did for you. We need $50,000 for the down payment on the condo, Anthony announced, circling a number on the pad. And another $20,000 for closing costs and furniture. Weston needs a proper studio. And Jessica, well, she deserves a nice ring if this is going to be serious. Let's call it $80,000 to start. $80,000, I repeated, my voice flat. You want me to write you a check for $80,000 today? It's an investment in your brother's future. Anthony beamed, as if he were offering me a rare opportunity. Think of it as paying back the family for all the years we supported you. Supported me? I felt a hysterical laugh bubbling up in my throat. You ignored my birthday yesterday. You didn't even call. Oh, stop harping on the birthday. K.H. Lowe rolled her eyes. We're talking about real life here, Olivia. Important things, Weston's future. My future is important too, I said quietly. You have enough. Anthony slammed the pen down. You have a $100,000 car. You clearly have more money than you know what to do with. It's immoral for you to keep it all while your family struggles. Struggles? I looked around the room, the 60-inch television, the designer furniture, the brand new espresso machine on the counter. You just bought a boat last summer, didn't you, Dad? That was a necessity. Anthony sputtered, his face turning red. For client entertainment, for business. You're retired, I pointed out. It's for networking. He yelled. You wouldn't understand. You just sit behind a computer all day. I looked at Weston. He was watching the exchange with a mixture of boredom and entitlement, scrolling on his phone as if the outcome, my money becoming his money, was a foregone conclusion. Weston, I said, do you think I should give you $80,000? He looked up, shrugging. I mean, if you have it, why not? It's not like you're using it for anything cool. You're always working. The casual greed, the absolute lack of shame, it was breathtaking. I'm not giving you a dime, I said. The silence that followed was absolute. Excuse me. Anthony whispered, his voice dangerously low. I said no, I repeated, louder this time. I am not giving you $80,000. I am not giving you 80 cents. My money is mine. I earned it. I built it. And I'm not bailing you out of your bad decisions anymore. Anthony stood up slowly. His face was a mask of fury. You listen to me, young lady. You live under my roof. I haven't lived under your roof in 7 years. I cut him off. You are part of this family, he roared. And in this family, we share. If you walk out that door without writing that check, you are turning your back on us forever. You are disowning your own flesh and blood. Is that a threat? I asked, my heart pounding. It's a promise, K.H. Lowe hissed, stepping forward. If you choose your money over your brother, don't expect to be welcome here for Christmas. Don't expect us to visit you when you're old and alone with your cats and your computer money. Fine, I said. If that's the cost of keeping my dignity, then fine. I turned to leave. Wait, Anthony shouted. You can't just leave. We have guests coming. Jessica is coming. What are we supposed to tell her? That Weston can't get the condo because his sister is a selfish miser. Tell her whatever you want, I said, reaching for the door handle. Tell her the truth. Tell her Weston is broke and his parents are enabling him. You. Anthony was sputtering now, searching for a word to hurt me. You were always a mistake. We should have stopped at one. The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. I froze. I didn't turn around. I just stood there, letting the cruelty wash over me. It confirmed everything I had always suspected but never wanted to believe. Thank you, I said softly, not looking back. Thank you for finally being honest. I walked out the door. I didn't get in my car immediately. I walked to the end of the driveway and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the screen. I dialed a number I knew by heart. This is Sarah from Investigations, a crisp voice answered. Sarah, it's Olivia, I said, my voice thick. I need you to pull everything on Anthony and K.H. Lowe Miller. Assets, liabilities, credit reports, recent large purchases, everything, and I need it now. On it, boss, Sarah said, the professional tone masking her surprise. Give me 10 minutes. I sat in my car, the engine idling, staring at the house. I watched as Jessica's car pulled into the driveway a few minutes later. She was a pretty girl, young and eager, carrying a bouquet of flowers. I watched K.H. Lowe greet her at the door with a fake smile, pulling her inside into the nest of vipers. 10 minutes later, my phone pinged. An email from Sarah. Subject: Miller Financial Report Urgent. I opened the attachment. As I scrolled through the pages, my jaw tightened. It was worse than I thought, much worse. They weren't just struggling. They were drowning, 3 mortgages on the house, maxed out credit cards in every name, including, I noticed with a jolt of horror, a card in my name that I had never opened. Wait, I zoomed in on the credit report. A credit card opened 3 years ago with a balance of $25,000. The billing address was a P.O. box in a neighboring town. The user, Olivia Miller. Identity theft. My own parents had stolen my identity to fund their lifestyle. I felt a cold rage settle over me, replacing the sadness. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was a crime. This was a betrayal so profound it severed whatever tenuous thread of loyalty remained. I scrolled further. The boat Anthony mentioned. Repossessed last month, though he clearly hadn't told anyone. The investments he bragged about. Non-existent. They were living on a mountain of debt, using one card to pay off another, a house of cards waiting for a stiff breeze. And they wanted my money to keep the charade going. To buy Weston a condo they couldn't afford, to impress a girl they didn't know, to maintain the illusion of being the successful, perfect family. I looked back at the house. They were probably in there right now, spinning lies to Jessica, badmouthing me, painting themselves as the victims of an ungrateful daughter. I could drive away. I could go back to the city, report the fraud, and let the legal system handle it. It would be cleaner, safer. But then I remembered the forgotten birthday. I remembered the mistake comment. I remembered the years of being made to feel small so Weston could feel big. No, driving away was too easy. I put the car in drive, but instead of backing out, I pulled forward, right up to the front door, blocking Jessica's car in. I killed the engine. I grabbed my phone, the evidence glowing on the screen. I walked back to the front door. I didn't knock this time. I used the key I had kept hidden in a magnetic box under the porch railing for emergencies, a key they had forgotten about. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The sound of laughter drifted from the dining room. They were already celebrating. "She's just jealous, really," I heard K.H. Lowe saying. "Poor thing has always been a bit unstable. We try to help her, but you can't save everyone." "Exactly," Weston chimed in. "She's got this weird complex about money, probably compensating for something." "Don't worry, Jessica," Anthony's voice boomed. "We'll get the condo sorted. We have resources Olivia doesn't know about. Family resources." I walked into the dining room. The laughter died instantly. Jessica looked up, startled. Weston choked on his wine. Anthony and K.H. Lowe went pale. "I thought you left," Anthony growled, standing up. "I did," I said, my voice calm, icy. "But then I found something interesting." I held up my phone. "I found out about the credit card you opened in my name 3 years ago, Dad." The color drained from Anthony's face so fast he looked like a corpse. "What?" K.H. Lowe whispered, dropping her fork. "The visa ending in 4590, I recited. $25,000 in debt. Used for, let's see, boat repairs, a trip to Cabo, and, oh, look at that, tuition payments for Weston's art retreat." Jessica looked from me to them, her eyes wide. "Weston, you said your parents paid for that." We did," Weston stammered. "I mean, it's complicated." "It's not complicated," I said, stepping closer to the table. "It's fraud, federal wire fraud to be exact, and identity theft." "Now, Olivia," Anthony stammered, raising his hands. "Let's not be hasty. It was a misunderstanding. We were going to pay it back." "With what?" I asked. "The money from the third mortgage on this house, or the money from the boat you don't own anymore?" "Third mortgage?" Jessica asked, her voice trembling. "Shut up." Anthony yelled at me. "You ungrateful brat. We did what we had to do to survive." "You did what you had to do to maintain an image," I corrected him. "You stole from your own daughter because you were too proud to get a job and too selfish to live within your means." I looked at Jessica. "Run," I said simply. "Run now before they open a card in your name too." Jessica stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I have to go." "Jessica, wait," Weston pleaded, reaching for her hand. "She's lying, she's crazy." "Don't touch me," Jessica snapped, pulling away. She looked at the Millers with disgust. "You people are sick." She grabbed her purse and ran for the door. "See what you did." K.H. Lowe screamed, standing up and throwing her napkin at me. "You ruined everything. You ruined his engagement. Are you happy now?" "I'm not happy," I said, feeling a strange, cold calm settle over me. "I'm just finished." "You think you can come in here and threaten us?" Anthony snarled, advancing on me. "I'm your father, I gave you life." "And you tried to steal my livelihood," I said, standing my ground. "I'm giving you one chance, Dad, one chance to stay out of prison." He stopped, breathing heavily. "What?" "I'm going to the police," I said. "Unless." "Unless what?" He hissed. "Unless you sign a confession," I said, admitting to the fraud and agreeing to a payment plan to reimburse me every single cent plus interest, and you sign over the title to this house as collateral." "You want the house?" K.H. Lowe shrieked. "This is our home." "It's the bank's home," I said. "And soon it might be mine. Take the deal or take the handcuffs. You have 5 minutes to decide." The silence in the dining room was heavy, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, a clock I now knew they had likely bought on credit. Anthony stared at me, his face a kaleidoscope of emotions: rage, fear, disbelief. He looked like a cornered animal, weighing the odds of attacking versus submitting. "You wouldn't," he sneered, trying to call my bluff. "You wouldn't put your own father in jail. Think of the scandal. Think of your precious company. How would it look if the CEO's father was a felon?" It would look like I have zero tolerance for fraud, I countered smoothly. My investors would love it. It shows integrity. You cold-hearted bee, K.H. Lowe started, but Anthony held up a hand to silence her. 5 minutes, I repeated, checking my watch. Sarah is already drafting the legal documents. I can have them emailed to you right now, or I can call the local precinct. The chief of police is a client of mine, actually. We just overhauled his department's cybersecurity. I'm sure he'd take my call. It was a small exaggeration. We handled the city's municipal servers, not specifically the police, but Anthony didn't know that. He just heard client and chief of police and crumbled. Weston, leave the room, Anthony muttered, sinking back into his chair. What? No. Weston protested, looking between us like a spectator at a tennis match. This involves me. She's talking about my inheritance. There is no inheritance, you idiot. Anthony snapped, his facade finally cracking completely. There's nothing. It's all gone. The house, the savings, the retirement, it's all gone. Weston recoiled as if slapped. What do you mean gone? But the condo, the boat. Leased, mortgaged, stolen. Anthony roared, tears of frustration welling in his eyes. We did it for you, to give you the life you deserved. And this is the thanks we get. You didn't do it for him, I said quietly. You did it for your own ego, to play the big shot. Get out, Weston, K.H. Lowe whispered, sinking into her chair and burying her face in her hands. Weston looked at me, then at his broken parents. For a second, I saw a flicker of realization in his eyes, the dawn of understanding that his entire world was built on sand. But then, true to form, he just sneered at me. I hope you rot, Olivia, he spat, before storming out of the room. Okay, Anthony said, his voice hollow. Okay, what do you want us to sign? My phone pinged. Check your email, I said. Print it out, sign it, both of you. K.H. Lowe got up, moving like a zombie, and went to the home office. We heard the printer whirring to life in the next room. It was a surreal sound, the mundane noise of office equipment punctuating the destruction of a family. She returned with 3 copies of the document. It was simple but brutal. An admission of guilt regarding the fraudulent credit card. A promissory note for the full $25,000 plus legal fees and interest. And a lien on the house, second position behind the bank, but enough to ensure they couldn't sell it without paying me first. Anthony read it over, his hands trembling. You're taking everything, he whispered. I'm taking back what's mine, I said, and ensuring you never do this to me again. He picked up a pen. He hesitated for a long moment, the tip hovering over the paper. He looked up at me one last time, searching for any trace of the daughter who used to beg for his approval. I'm sorry we forgot your birthday, he said weakly. It was a pathetic attempt at manipulation, a Hail Mary pass to guilt-trip me. No, you're not, I said. You're sorry you got caught. He signed. Then K.H. Lowe signed, sobbing quietly as she did. I took the papers, folded them neatly, and placed them in my inside blazer pocket. I'll file these in the morning. If you miss a single payment, one single payment, I go to the police with the confession. Do you understand? We understand, Anthony whispered. Good. I turned to leave. I walked through the hallway, past the photos of Weston winning participation trophies, past the empty space where my graduation picture should have been. I opened the front door and stepped out into the cool night air. The fever was gone. The exhaustion was gone. I felt lighter than I had in years. I walked to my car, the Lucid gleaming under the streetlights. I got in, the door closing with a solid, reassuring thud. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw Weston standing in the window of his old bedroom, watching me leave. He looked small. He looked trapped. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel anger. I just felt free. I drove away, leaving the house of cards to collapse in the rearview mirror. I had a company to run. I had a life to live. And for the first time, it was entirely, undeniably my own. The following morning, I was back in the city, seated at the head of my conference table, looking out over the skyline. My team was briefing me on the quarterly projections, but my mind was miles away, replaying the scene in my parents' dining room. The signed confession burned a hole in my briefcase. It was my insurance policy, my shield against future manipulation. but it wasn't closure. Closure, I realized, wasn't something you could force with a signature. Closure was something you had to build. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Weston. Weston, Jessica broke up with me. She said I'm a fraud. Thanks a lot. I didn't reply. I just deleted the message. The next few months were a blur of activity. My company continued to grow, fueled by the same relentless drive that had always propelled me forward. I bought a new condo, a real one with a view of the park, paid for with my own money. I started dating a man named David, a kind, intelligent architect who listened when I talked and remembered my birthday without prompting. But the silence from my family was deafening. No calls, no texts. Just the monthly check arriving like clockwork, always the minimum amount, always late, always accompanied by a passive-aggressive note from KHLO about how hard things are. Then 6 months later, the check stopped. I waited a week, then 2, then a month. I called Anthony, voicemail. I called KHLO, voicemail. I called the house. Disconnected. Panic, cold and familiar, gripped me, not for their safety, but for the possibility that they were scheming again, that they had found a new victim, a new way to evade responsibility. I drove down to the suburbs on a Saturday morning. The leaves were turning brown, mirroring the decay I felt in my gut. When I pulled up to the house, my heart sank. A for sale sign stood in the yard, but not just any sign, a bank foreclosure sign. The grass was knee-high, the windows were dark, the life had been sucked out of the place. I walked up to the front door, peering through the glass. The house was empty. Furniture gone, pictures gone, just bare walls and dust motes dancing in the sunbeams. They had run. They had abandoned the house, abandoned the debt, abandoned me. I stood on the porch, feeling a strange mix of anger and relief. They were gone, truly gone. They couldn't hurt me anymore. They had chosen to run rather than face the consequences of their actions. I turned to leave, but something caught my eye. A piece of paper taped to the inside of the glass on the front door. I leaned in closer. It was a note, scrawled in Anthony's handwriting. Olivia. If you're reading this, we're gone. We couldn't afford the payments. We couldn't afford the shame. You win, you were right about everything. But remember this, you may have the money, but you'll never have a family. Enjoy your empty life. Dad. I stared at the note, reading it over and over. You'll never have a family. It was the final, desperate lash of a dying beast, a last attempt to wound me. But as I stood there, looking at the empty shell of a house that had never been a home, I realized something profound. They weren't my family. They were just people I shared DNA with. My family was the team waiting for me back in the city. My family was David, who was probably making dinner right now. My family was Sarah, who had dropped everything to help me that night. My family was the community I had built, the life I had chosen. I tore the note off the glass, crumbled it into a ball, and tossed it into the overgrown bushes. Goodbye, Anthony, I whispered. 2 years later, I was standing on the balcony of my penthouse, watching the city lights twinkle below. Inside, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses filled the air. It was my 31st birthday. David came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. Happy birthday, Liv, he whispered, kissing my neck. Everyone's asking for you. Time to cut the cake. In a minute, I said, leaning back into him, just taking it all in. It's a good view, he agreed. It's perfect, I said. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, half expecting a ghost from the past. But it wasn't. It was an email from a lawyer. Subject, estate of Anthony Miller, notice to creditors. My breath hitched. I opened the email. Anthony had passed away from a heart attack 3 days ago in a small town in Florida. He had died with less than $500 in his bank account. KHLO was in a state-run nursing facility, suffering from early-onset dementia. Weston was nowhere to be found. The email explained that as a known creditor, thanks to the lien I had placed on the house, I had a claim on his estate, which was essentially nothing. I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. Not for the father I had lost, but for the father I never had, for the wasted potential, for the love that was conditional on a bank balance. Everything okay? David asked, sensing my shift in mood. Yeah, I said, putting the phone away. Just closing a chapter. I turned around and looked at the party inside. My friends, my colleagues, my chosen family. People who loved me for who I was, not what I could give them. I saw Sarah raising a glass to me from across the room. I saw my assistant laughing with my VP of engineering. I saw a room full of genuine connection, built on respect and shared values. This was my family. I walked back inside, leaving the ghosts on the balcony. I cut the cake. I made a speech. I laughed until my sides hurt. And for the first time in my life, on my birthday, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. I felt valued. I felt whole. Anthony was wrong. I didn't have an empty life. I had a life full of everything that mattered, and the best part, I had built it myself.